is the Carson City Culture and Tourism Authority Board of Directors meeting. Today is Friday, November 15th, 2024. It is 4 p.m. and we are at the Carson City Community Center, Robert Bob Kroll Boardroom. And can we get a roll call?
Yes, Andrew Reno,
Here.
Stacy Giomi,
Here.
Damon Bott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Can everybody stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? And then afterwards, if you could remain standing for a moment of silence. The community lost a good partner this year, and if we could stand for a moment of silence, and then Stacy is going to go ahead and say a few words. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I just wanted to comment. I think most people know that Charlie Aboud passed away unexpectedly Sunday morning, and Karen, who was on the Board of Supervisors, Charlie was, they were a duo to speak of, and a force of nature, really, if you think about it. And Charlie was just so embedded in this community, and of course, Karen was so embedded in the arts community, having served on this board for 8 years. In addition to the Board of Supervisors. Sorry about that. So the community really lost a great guy, and Charlie was a big supporter of the arts. In fact, I got to host. I was the MC for 2 years in a row. They did a Dancing with the Stars fundraiser here in Carson, and Charlie danced both times he got geared up like Jerry Garcia because he really sort of resembled Jerry Garcia pretty close. So one of those things, he was in complete tie-dye, and anyway, he was a great guy, and it's a huge loss for the community and the family, and certainly for Karen. It was completely unexpected. So this community owes him a debt of gratitude. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. We'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. No public comment? Okay, and then we'll move on to item 5 for possible action and approval of minutes. Is there any changes or corrections that need to be made?
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes of Carson City Cultural and Tourism Authority for October 14th as presented.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Well, we will move on to, let's see. Would any individuals like any items pulled from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 6 and 7 as presented.
Can we get a second? Okay, I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. We will move on. We're good to go to 9? Okay, we'll go to item number 9, discussion and possible action regarding the approval of the CTA fiscal year 2024 annual audit report and financial statement. We're going to get a staff summary from Casey Nilsson.
we have Nikki Nealon on, Mr. Chair. So Nikki, with that, I'll let you go ahead and take it away and talk the board through the fiscal 2024 audit report and CTA financial statements through June 30, 2024. Please. Nikki, did we lose you? Nikki, are you there? Mr. Chair, if I might make a recommendation, maybe we could come back to this item. While
Okay, we'll go ahead and table 9 and move on to 10 for discussion.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Presentation and discussion of the Carson City economic impact and tourism. Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave Peterson, Executive Director, Visit Carson City, for the record. I'm so happy to have Mr. Kyle Schultz here. He is the Director of Research for the Nevada Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, and he and Gabriel, who works with him, did an amazing job. Put together, I think, a great recap presentation for calendar 23 in terms of impact, tied a lot of other pieces of the puzzle together for us, and really came up with, I think, a nice look at last calendar year in terms of Carson City tourism, what it means to this particular community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Schultz.
Thanks, Dave. Kyle Schultz, Research Director for the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs for the state. Before I start, I will say I learned everything I know from Dave, so if you have any issues with what is in the presentation, take it up with Dave. Also wanted to applaud all of you for wanting to go through a 40-plus page deck on research at 4:08, almost 4:09 on a Friday afternoon. So with that, we just kind of wanted to give a broad overview of some of the things that we collect on a state level that pertain to Carson City. So part of this is the economic impact data that Dave had mentioned. But we also wanted to give kind of a broader overview of some other data that we collect as well on a visitor profile side, on a we have some geolocation data that we wanted to share with you all as well. And then we'll finish up with a brief kind of economic update of where we see things going, and not just us, but other vendors in the tourism space. So there's some slides on some data from MMGY, tourism economics, and that sort of thing. So just to start off, we wanted to just briefly go over the economic impacts that we have for Carson City. We work on these impacts in conjunction with the firm Tourism Economics. So essentially, we provide Tourism Economics with a lot of data that we collect on the ground. Those are things like room tax collections, visitor volume, gaming data, that sort of thing. We pass that data along to Tourism Economics, and they're able to model out, based on the data that we have for the different parts of the state, economic impacts of travel and tourism. So one thing that we wanted to note in the upper left-hand corner is direct spending by visitors over time. This is over the last 5 years. And really, Carson City was not hit as hard as the state was in terms of direct spend by the pandemic. We'll talk about that a little bit more in depth a little bit later on. Carson City still did drop about 25% in visitor spending from 2019 to 20. But again, that's relatively mild compared to what the state experienced. In 2023, visitor spending was up to about $245 million based on this methodology. And that's an increase of about $35 million from 2019. So some really nice growth there. On an employment level, the chart in the upper right-hand corner, the total number of people employed in the travel and tourism industry, or the travel and tourism space in Carson City, was 2,467 in 2023. That's exactly where it was in 2019. The state overall is still below where we were on an employment level compared to 2019. So Carson City's actually done a little bit better in that respect. There's several reasons for that, which we can go into if you'd like, on the state level at least. But employment, again, in Carson City is back to where it was pre-pandemic. On the labor income side, those 2467 people in 2023 earned about $93 million in labor income. And that is obviously money that also gets shared throughout the economy. We also wanted to look at spending comparisons. This is still economic impact data for Carson City compared to the state as a whole. So what we're looking at here is still direct spending. So you obviously see the $245 million spent in Carson City in 2023. As I mentioned, the chart on the bottom shows growth year over year. Carson City is in the purple, the state as a whole is in orange. And so in 2020, Carson City only, and I use only in quotation marks, dropped 24% in visitor spending. The state as a whole dropped over 50%. So compared to the state overall, Carson City was not nearly as impacted by the pandemic as the state was. And in 2021, Carson City was already above pre-pandemic levels in terms of spending. It recovered very quickly. The state, we didn't see higher levels of direct visitor spending compared to pre-pandemic levels until 2022. But on the flip side of that, Carson City, you can see the visitor spending numbers are starting to plateau a little bit, whereas the state, we still see continued growth. And that is true for most other metrics that we have in terms of spending categories. So lodging follows the same sort of pattern. Food and beverage follows the same sort of pattern as well, although the state kind of was even year over year in 2023 based on these estimates. Retail spend shows a similar trajectory, recreation, gaming, and transportation. So really kind of the thing that I just wanted to mention here was just kind of the trends of what we're seeing. The state in a lot of different categories, we're still seeing robust spending increases. Carson City is starting to slow down a little bit. And that's not necessarily a Carson City specific piece of data. That's more rural Nevada generally. Again, rural Nevada, generally speaking, was not hit as hard during the pandemic, but and recovered more quickly. But the state as a whole, driven by Las Vegas, has seen really robust gains in spending over the last couple of years. And we'll go through some more of that in a couple minutes. Next, we wanted to look at some visitation statistics. These roughly mirror what we just saw on the spending side of things, because this is data that is goes into the spending models that tourism economics uses. So room nights occupied with Carson City has really stayed the same, kind of flatlined since 2021. The state as a whole, we're still seeing increases in room nights occupied year over year. One caveat to make with this data is Carson City had greater levels of room nights occupied compared to 2019 in 2021, and you're still above 2019 levels. The state as a whole, we still, on an annual basis, have not gotten back up to 2019 levels yet. So in that respect, Carson City is doing a little bit better than the state, even though the state is still growing year over year. In Carson City over the last couple of years has basically been flat. Room demand is greater than it was in 2019 in Carson City, which is not the same for the state. This is room inventory. Room inventory for the state has grown along at a pretty steady pace. And this, I will say, is room inventory as of the last month of the calendar year. So there could be some fluctuations based on seasonality that could impact these. Carson City, you see fluctuate with a dip in 2020, an increase in 2021, dip in 2022, an increase in 2023. So again, this could be due to just some fluctuations as of the last month of the year. For, you know, a property might have closed, or they might have closed some room blocks. So I wouldn't take too much away from that. Occupancy rate is largely mirrors what we saw from the room demand slide, so we won't go too far into that. Average daily rate is a little bit of an interesting one, in that both Carson City and the state have seen pretty strong gains in average daily rates of hotel properties since the onset of the pandemic. One thing that we have noticed on the state side is just the very big ability of large events to help drive average rates on a particular monthly basis. So when Taylor Swift has a concert in Las Vegas or Formula One, the Super Bowl, even though those things might be over the course of a weekend or a few days out of the month, those really have a tendency to drive rates to very, very high levels. I think the average rate for Formula One last November was $275. The Super Bowl was about $250. And those were way, way, way above prior year numbers for the state or for Las Vegas. So even though these events don't take course over the entire month, they still have the ability to drive rates. With Carson City, obviously you don't have those massive events, but investing in things like major events like the Mark Twain Days, that can help to drive rates for properties in the city, drive revenue for Carson City CTA, and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to bring that up as a point of emphasis of something that we've noticed it's kind of in your face at the state level when you're setting records on a month like November or February, which are usually soft months, and those are just primarily due to events. One other thing that we thought was of interest to bring to the board's attention is key drivers of interest for visiting Carson City. So this is derived from one of the surveys that we do with a research firm called the OmniTrack Group. In this survey, we ask about interest in visiting certain parts of the state, Carson City obviously included, but we ask about Reno, Las Vegas, Elko, kind of rural Nevada generally. And a second kind of component to this question is what makes you interested in visiting this part of the state, whatever part of the state we're asking about. And so the research firm, the OmniTrack Group, kind of takes all of that data and creates, we don't have to go into how they necessarily calculate this unless you want to, but they're able to kind of take those answers and really figure out what sort of aspects are driving are key drivers of interest for visiting places like Carson City. So based on this analysis, things like outdoor recreation play a big role. So has a beautiful landscape is the category that's most represented in this pie chart. But has many outdoor recreation opportunities is also represented at 13% here. Quality lodging options is another one. So quality and affordability both show up here. And then safety, Carson City being a safe place to visit shows up at 18% here. So when you look at places like Reno, Las Vegas, it's more about exciting nightlife, travel based around events, whereas Carson City, it's more landscape driven, safety and affordability driven. The next thing we wanted to look at was visitor profile comparison. So this is also driven by a survey that we do with the OmniTrack Group. One thing that I did want to note here is the sample size for what we're looking at here. So on the bottom left, you'll see the sample size for the survey as a whole, which is 2167. For Carson City, it's 116. So that sample size is relatively low. I would take this with a grain of salt. Maybe use this as more directional than set in stone. But one thing that is evident through this data, through the survey data for our visitor profiles, is Carson City is much more heavily reliant on day trips compared to the state as a whole. There is some nuance with this as well that we can go into if you'd like. But roughly 30% of trips to the state that involve Carson City are day trips, whereas it's only about 10% for the state overall. Age range is also another kind of interesting one. Carson City over-indexes compared to the state in the age group of 25 to 34, but also in 55 to 64. The differences aren't massive here, and so this could be, take this with a bit of a grain of salt just because of the sample size with the Carson City data. But that was something that we thought was a little bit of interest, just the kind of dichotomy of the age range where Carson City over-indexes compared to the state. One other thing that we thought was interesting was an education breakdown. So when you look at Carson City compared to the state, or visitors who visit Carson City compared to the state overall, again, Carson City kind of over-indexes in the the education levels of associate's degrees or lower, whereas people who are traveling to the state overall have higher shares for college degrees and postgraduate degrees. And this, we know education ties into income, and so household income, Carson City also over-indexes for income levels of $75,000 and below, whereas the state has higher shares of household income of travelers at 75,000 and above. This will be, we'll come back to this. This will be kind of a recurring thing later on in the deck. In terms of accommodation types, Carson City over-indexes for things like staying at a friend's or relative's residence, staying at a non-casino hotel motel. The state is obviously very driven by Las Vegas, and so we're very driven by casino hotel motel accommodations overall. So just something to keep in mind there. Another thing that we thought was a little bit of interest, probably not surprising, but still interesting, is Carson City also over-indexes for kind of family travel or having children in the household. So visitors to Carson City have higher shares of people with kids ages 12 and younger, and lower shares of people who say that they don't have any kids in their household. This also leads to higher travel party size levels. So Carson City has higher shares of people saying that their travel party is either 4 people or 5 people or more when compared to the state. Both the state and Carson City, the highest category is 2, which would indicate spousal or traveling with a good friend or maybe a kid, a single child. But we did think that it was interesting that travel party size is a little bit greater. At least Carson City is overrepresented in 4 people or 5 people or more when compared to the overall state. Another thing that we thought was interesting was when we ask about people's primary purpose of trip, visiting friends and relatives, Carson City also over-indexes compared to the state. That wasn't necessarily a surprise, but you'll notice outdoor recreation as a primary purpose for traveling. The state has a slightly higher share than Carson City. In this question, people have to select one response. And so they have to select the main reason why they're traveling. So again, Carson City over-indexes for things like visiting friends and relatives, taking a road trip, entertainment, things like that, but not necessarily for outdoor recreation, which was a little bit of a surprise. But when we ask in the survey, you can select any reason why you're traveling. Here's where we really see things like outdoor recreation take a big leap for Carson City. So visit friends and relatives is still a dominant factor here. But one thing that is also evident is Carson City over-indexes for a lot of different categories. So things like, again, outdoor recreation, military-related, sporting event, that sort of thing. So you could read this in one way that when people are visiting a place like Carson City, they're doing a lot of different things on a trip, whereas if you're visiting a place like Las Vegas, you might be more concentrated in doing a couple of different things. This also, we get a little bit more granular in kind of follow-up questions in this survey, and so we ask about different types of activities that people might have experienced on their trip. And again, what we see with people who say that they have visited Carson City on their trip to the state, there's a lot of different things that people say that they do more of when you compare Carson City to the state overall. So these are things like golfing, fishing, visiting museums, going to a cultural site, visiting a Native American site. So there's a lot of, again, a lot of different things that people are saying that they're doing on a trip that involves Carson City. Whereas again, the state overall, it's very heavily driven by things like casino resorts, dining restaurants, gaming, that sort of thing. So just a little bit of an interesting thing to kind of keep in mind. Finally, with this section, we thought it would be interesting to look at other cities that people visit when they're on their trip. So again, this is a sample size of 116, so take this with a little bit of a grain of salt, but probably not surprisingly, Reno and Lake Tahoe are, and I know South Lake and North Lake are not necessarily cities of themselves, but Reno and Lake Tahoe are kind of the other main places that people go on a trip to Carson City. So there's a lot of other places that people go when they're visiting Carson City within the Reno Tahoe territory generally. We wanted to pair what we just saw, which was geolocation, or which was survey data, with geolocation data. This is also 2023. This comes from one of the vendors we work with, Zartico. So a couple of things that we wanted to point out here is one, top visitor markets. So this is based on designated market area, which is DMA, so kind of the broader region. And Carson City is really reliant on a couple of main markets. One, Sacramento, the Bay Area is another big market. LA, Las Vegas, and Reno kind of make up the top five. You would think intuitively that Reno should probably be number one on this list. The reason why it's not number one and why it's number five is this is based on people traveling greater than 50 miles. So most of the city of Reno is within a 50-mile radius of Carson City. The Reno DMA also has places like Humboldt County and Lander County and that sort of thing. I think it delves into a little bit of Eastern California as well. So this isn't, intuitively, again, you would think Reno should be number one. It's number five here because of that reason. But Carson City is much more kind of heavily concentrated on these Northern California markets than the state is overall. Another thing that we wanted to point out, which was interesting when we looked at this specific data, was out of those top 10 markets, what percentage of people are being seen at accommodations. So an accommodation is obviously things like a hotel or the Gold Dust West, because it's a hotel casino, that sort of thing. And when you look at it in this sense, kind of the markets that made up the lower end of that, the top 10 markets in terms of overall volume, are showing up in accommodations at higher percentages. So those are markets like Portland, Salt Lake, Seattle, those sorts of markets. And so what this could mean is when you're going to target different geographic regions from a marketing perspective, you might want to think about some of these kind of more mid-haul type markets, because they have higher tendencies to potentially stay at accommodations and drive revenue for Carson City properties and the CTA. So markets like San Francisco, Sacramento, Reno, they may be taking more day trips. They may be staying with friends and relatives, and so they're seen at accommodations at a lower percentage. And then kind of the final thing we wanted to look at from a geolocation standpoint that really kind of confirms what we were seeing on the survey side of things is we categorize points of interest in the state across the numerous different categories. So you'll see here things like outdoor recreation, accommodations, retail, food, etc. And again, what we see here is Carson City, people are doing a lot of different things. People are going to outdoor recreation. People are being seen at accommodations, retail, food, arts and entertainment, etc. Whereas with the state overall, it's really heavily concentrated in accommodations, which makes sense. The state is very driven by one strip of land, and the strip is primarily made up of accommodations. So a little bit of a caveat here is that these accommodations on the strip, they also have retail, they also have food. So people could be going to those within the accommodations. That's just not being picked up here. But I think it is pretty clear here that places like Carson City, people are doing a lot of different things on their trip. So the last thing that we kind of wanted to bring up is just a very brief economic update. These are some of the indicators that we look at on a monthly basis to try to see where things are headed economically, as we know that impacts travel and tourism. So here on the top left, we're looking at positive indicators. One of these is the consumer price index, so inflation. You can see in mid-2022, late 2022, inflation was almost at 10% based on the CPI. That's come down. So that black line is the Federal Reserve's target, which is a 2% rate. So we're just above that currently, and so lower inflation is good for consumers. It makes consumers feel that their money is going farther when inflation is lower. So the fact that we're getting close to 2% is a good thing. On the top right is the change in employment on a month-to-month basis for the U.S. overall. So this is essentially showing that over the last 2.5 to 3 years, the U.S. has gained thousands and sometimes hundreds of thousands of jobs on a monthly basis. We know that there's a strong relationship with tourism demand and with the level of employment in the U.S. And so to see a sustained increase in employment is good for travel and tourism. The bottom left is average hourly earnings compared to the inflation rate. This chart's a little hard to read because it's a little bit squished. But anytime that blue line, which is the gain in average hourly earnings, is above the orange line, that means that wages are increasing at a faster rate than inflation. So that is obviously good for consumers' pocketbooks. That makes people feel wealthier, that makes their buying power better, and that means they're more likely to be able to afford things like travel and tourism, which is kind of a discretionary type of spending. You'll see coming out of the pandemic from January 2022 to about middle part of 2023, inflation was ahead of average hourly earnings. And so people's real buying power was lessened in that. So we're still in some sense catching up a little bit. But the fact that wages as of right now have been growing faster than inflation for about the last year and a half is a good thing. And then finally on the bottom right-hand side is real consumer spending growth. That's been strong. That's been roughly between 2 and 3% over the last couple of years. And this is a good indicator because if consumer spending is strong, that means business revenue and profits are strong. And so businesses are more likely to keep employees on the books. And we know that employment is highly tied to travel and tourism. So those are all things on the positive side. On the negative side in the top left, consumer sentiment is still relatively low. Especially for being in kind of an expansionary period over the last couple of years. That could be tied to inflation, the inflation numbers that we saw earlier, where people were feeling that their buying power just wasn't going as far as they thought it should. It is on the rise, but it is still relatively low. In the top right is job openings per unemployed worker. The black line there is a value of 1, and essentially what that means is when you hit that line, that means there's 1 job opening per each person who's looking for a job. So if you're below that line, that means there's more job openings than there are people looking for jobs. So that is good implication for wage increases. People have more buying power when they're looking for jobs. That has good implications for the employment rate and all of that, and the number of people employed. So we're kind of creeping up to that black line. We still haven't crossed it. And I will say, even if we do cross that line, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a recession impending. It's just kind of an interesting indicator to see how easily jobs are available. During the Great Recession, I think we were at about 7 or 8 people looking for a job for every job opening. So we're obviously nowhere near that point. Those were kind of dire times, but the fact that this is increasing, we're coming close to that line, is a little bit of a warning sign. And then kind of in the bottom left-hand corner is U.S. personal savings rate. This is relatively low even compared to where we were prior to the pandemic. You'll see in 2019, we were around 7% to 10% in terms of personal savings. Now we're closer to 4-ish%, 4 to 5%, somewhere in that range. And so that's a little bit worrying because if we do experience a downturn, people might be less insulated against that if they're not saving up as much as they maybe should. And this also kind of corresponds to the chart on the bottom right, which is debt balance on U.S. credit cards. So at the same time as we've seen savings go down, we've seen debt on credit cards go up. And so that could mean that people are having to dip into debt in order to pay for things that they were able to pay for before with just their income. And so if that is the case, that's obviously not a sustainable path forward, especially because debt on credit cards is high interest. Student loan debt is also a thing to consider that's not on this chart here, but those numbers are on the increase as well. So anytime there's lots of debt, that just means there's less available money for people to spend on discretionary things like travel and tourism. Just a couple things that we also thought was interesting and that we wanted to point out here is some of these headlines that have been in the news recently. These are a few months old now, or a couple months old, but they all kind of point to the lower end of the consumer from a household income standpoint starting to pull back and starting to kind of feel the weight of inflation and that sort of thing. So there's this report from Skift that was showing that low-end hotel properties were seeing a hit in revenue while luxury properties were doing really pretty well. McDonald's earning revenue had missed their estimates a few months ago. And so again, all of this kind of points to the lower household in terms of household earnings kind of starting to pull back. And we do see this in some of the survey results that we've looked at recently. This is MMGY. We don't subscribe to MMGY's survey, but we do get this information from vendors like Tourism Economics. And so their most recent survey from the third quarter of 2024 is showing that consumers, again, on the lower end of the income scale, are not planning trips at the rate that they had a couple of years ago. And so at the same time, again, you see people on the upper end of the scale, the 150,000, 250,000, those people are planning trips at very high rates. And so this is important because of what we showed earlier, where the Carson City demographic makeup skews a little bit towards the lower income. And so if those people are starting to pull back, you might be seeing that in property performance in Carson City. Tourism Economics also does forecasts for the U.S. hotel market generally. So this isn't state of Nevada specific or Carson City specific. But they do forecast on revenue per room. This is 2024 and their forecast for 2025. 2024 is year to date, obviously. But what they're seeing from data from CoStar and STR is that properties in the upper upscale, the upscale, upper mid-scale, they're doing pretty well. Luxury is relatively flat. But it's the mid-scale and the economy types of properties, which again kind of cater to those lower income of travelers. Those are the property types that are really hurting. 2025, on a similar note, Tourism Economics is anticipating that those kind of upper income properties, or the properties that cater to upper income individuals, should be okay, and they should see pretty decent revenue growth. But again, that mid-scale and economy properties, those are the ones that are going to be relatively hard hit, or at least growing the slowest. This is also important for Carson City because I was looking at how STR classifies different properties, and roughly half of Carson City's properties are in the mid-scale economy division. Carson City has a decent chunk of independent properties, and you also have a couple of upscale and upper mid-scale properties, but about half are in the mid-scale to economy section. And so just keep that in mind. That could be, if you're seeing lower levels of hotel demand, this could be a reason why. And the last thing we kind of wanted to end on was Tourism Economics forecast for essentially RevPAR over the next couple of years. And really what they're forecasting from a national perspective is occupancy to grow at a relatively slow rate, so demand to not be super robust over the next couple of years. And so really where the growth is going to come from a revenue perspective, is not on the demand side, it's on the revenue side, or the rate side. So they're anticipating rates to grow between 2% and 3% per year through 2026. So with that, that's all I had for you. That was 30 minutes of research data, and we're now at 4:40 in the afternoon on a Friday. So thank you for allowing me to present, and be happy to take any questions you
That
have.
was a great presentation. You made David look good. Does anyone have any questions? No?
Can I just jump in,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair? I just want to say thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Gabriel. I really appreciate the time that you put in on this, and appreciate you showing the comparisons too on the Nevada level. And also giving us a peek on the national basis as well. So it makes my 5-pager last year look pitiful, honestly. So yeah.
Made them look good and bad at the same time.
Yeah.
It was a great presentation,
Yeah.
though.
Thank
It
you.
really was.
Thank you.
It would be great to keep that going and keep the years, in there, because I think it's helpful, and it's helpful for us to post it for our lodging properties too, so they have an idea what's, potentially what's going on, so, thank you.
All right, and then we tabled 9, so we'll go back to item 9 for possible action, discussion of possible action regarding approval of the CTA fiscal year 2024 annual audit report and financial statement.
Nikki, can
Thank you,
you?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I'm going to let Nikki take it away.
All right, well, I apologize. My computer decided it needed to do a WebEx update in the middle of the webinar earlier, so I do apologize for that. And the only thing more exciting than a presentation at 4:40 on tourism data is a presentation on the financial statement audit at 4:40 on a Friday afternoon. So I will definitely keep it brief for you. Before I get started, I would like to introduce Adele Oakes. Adele was the audit manager on your audit and has worked on this audit for the past 3 years. So I wanted her to be here. She's the one that did all the heavy lifting. I just get to come and present to you. I also want to really thank Chris and David. They're a credit to your organization. They do a fantastic job. They are very responsive. They get us everything we need when we need it, and really help us move through your audit and be able to present a quality product to you. So many thanks to them, and as an organization, you should be proud of the work that they do. So the first thing I would like to draw your attention to is the independent auditor's report. This is at the beginning of your packet, and we do provide several opinions. They're all in the same report. The first is on the government activities in each major fund. And the governmental activities are what are commonly known as your government-wide financial statements, and your major funds are the breakdown of the 3 different funds that you have. So we give opinions on all of those. The page 8 is your statement of net position. This is essentially the equivalent of your balance sheet, although it looks a little different because it comes down to a net position number. This is on full accrual basis, whereas your fund financial statements are on a modified accrual basis. The difference is that accounts receivable that are collected after 60 days get reported on your government-wide financial statements. They don't get reported on your fund financial statements. And we also make adjustments for things like your fixed assets, your retirement obligations, your other post-employment benefit obligations, and compensated absences and leases. So those don't get reported on your fund financial statements, but do get reported on your government-wide financial statements. So at June 30, your total assets were a little under 4.3 million. The largest component there was cash and investments at $3.8 million. Lodging taxes receivable were $345,000. Your assets are up from the prior year, and that's primarily in your cash and investments. The deferred outflow of resources are items that are reported to you from the state of Nevada and from Carson City relative to your retirement benefits and your other post-employment benefits. And those were $575,000 for total assets and deferred outflows of $4.8 million. Liabilities were very consistent from last year to this year at total liabilities of $1.97 million. Your largest liability is the pension liability, closely followed by the other post-employment benefit obligation. And then your deferred inflow of resources were $330,000 to give total liabilities and deferred inflows of $2.3 million. Now, the pension liability and your deferred inflows and deferred outflows get funded essentially on a pay-as-you-go basis with your contributions to PERS and to the OPEB plan. This is not something that tomorrow you would be required to liquidate and transfer cash and investments over to pay, but you do pay them as you go and make your contributions to PERS and the OPEB plan. Your net position of $2.5 million is broken into several components. The first is your net investment in capital assets that reflects non-spendable balances. As you already have those on your balance sheet, and those are subject to depreciation. You have a restricted amount for bond payments, that's a little over $1 million, and a restricted amount for $88,000 for the V&T Railroad, and your unrestricted undesignated net position is $1,378,000. Moving on to page 9, this is your statement of activities. And you can, it's a little bit of a different presentation from those of you that are business owners. We start with expenses and take from, and then take from that the operating grants and contributions that you receive to come up with the cost of the net cost of your governmental activities. And then we add in your general revenues. So you can see that the cost of your governmental activities are $2.3 million. And those are funded primarily by room taxes at $2.9 million and interest income at $123,000. You had a positive change in net position this year of $680,000, and that took your beginning net position from $1.85 million to your ending net position of $2.5 million. We do also provide a balance sheet of your governmental funds. This is on page 10. So these are your modified accrual financial statements for each of the funds. And then page 11 is how we get from those fund financial statements to those government-wide financial statements. Page 12 is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. So again, this is the income statement for each of your funds on a modified accrual basis. And page 13 is how we get from that statement to your government-wide financial statement. So those are all detailed out. We do also provide a report on your internal controls and compliance, and that is on page, let me get there, on page 38 of your financial statements. And so this is a report on internal control over financial reporting on compliance. I'm happy to report that we had no matters that were required to be reported in that report. And we did not have any findings. We did not have any findings in the prior year either. And the last report is on page 40. These are our auditors' comments. This looks at statute compliance, prior year statute compliance, and any recommendations that we might have. Happy to report that all of that is very standard and we have no recommendations and we had no deficiencies noted. There are a couple of items that will change your reporting in the upcoming year. There are 2 new standards that will be implemented. The first is on compensated absences, and the second is on risk and credit disclosures. And so those will be a slight change to your financial statements in the upcoming year. Other than that, I have nothing to report to the board. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Okay, move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. Now we're going to move on.
Thank you. I'd like to just say we appreciate working with you, and I wish all of you a happy holidays.
Thank you so much and happy holidays.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, good to move on. All right, we'll move on to 11, monthly non-action items for presentations and discussion only. Dave, you want me to turn it over to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And let me just add on the audit. That's all, Chris. The team getting information to her throughout the course of the year, but Chris keeps us clean, keeps us out of jail, and so thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to 11A, Executive Director's Update. Just a couple quick things on the V&T front. PEX, basically, we did sell out. There might be one or two odd tickets here or there. Last night's media partner night was very well attended, with just a handful of seats left on the 5 p.m. Same for our Davis Fire first responders train at 8 o'clock. And I got to say that Lydia Beck and her family were on Channel 2 News. They were in the Santa with Laura getting their picture taken. So yeah, just the PR, she said, follows her wherever she goes. But no, it was we had the backdrops, a newly renovated area where everybody gets in line to load onto the train. New music, new scripting, the whole 9 yards. So I really appreciate what Carla did to liven up, the show. So it's not the same thing that people saw last year because we have such a repeat customer for Polar Express. So I really appreciate the effort that she and the whole team, for that matter, put in on that front. VTRailway.com. So we have completed the strategy, sitemap, and the mood boards for the new website. The next step will be content outlines on the high-level pages, and then, of course, the actual web design itself. And I'm very pleased to say that the history of the VNT will be very prominently displayed on the website, along with a very, very, very super easy ticketing funnel, because obviously we make the money off ticket sales. And then in addition, we're also planning to incorporate all 3 train excursions. So as we all know, we have the V&T taking you into the canyon or from Carson City to Virginia City. We have the Nevada State Railroad Museum here in Carson City. You can take the McKean car or one of the other cars around. And then Tom Gray, of course, has the short line up at the top of Virginia City. And we are going to do our very darndest to dispel the confusion, the misunderstanding that somebody did something that they didn't really do, or we get the phone calls where they're upset because they thought they went to Virginia City, but really they were at the Railroad Museum in Carson City, and now realize the weekend they're here, we're not running a train between Carson City and Virginia City. So more to come on that, but I'm very pleased with the process that we're going through on that end of things. So 3D Cultural Corridor update, the RFP for the executive director to oversee the execution of the grant itself, as well as the creation of the forthcoming nonprofit organization, was released yesterday. So huge thanks, Mr. Brooks, Chris, who's going to run point on that RFP process for us, as well as Ms. Erica Perry up there in Virginia City, and Mr. Brian Fitzgerald down in Carson Valley. So those are my brief updates for the board this month, and I'm happy to entertain any questions if there are any. All righty, not hearing any, we will move on to 11B, transient occupancy tax, actual versus forecast. That's the big sheet in the packet. July and August were great. Obviously, September, not so great. Down 6.28% relative to our budget, 7.21% relative to September a year ago. I think we fared better, I will say, than our peers in Reno. I was looking at some statistics from them, and they were down over 20-something% for Washoe County. Lake, flat down. Those stats are not out yet. I do believe we were impacted. We're usually overflow in the past for air races in September. Air races did not happen this year. It was, I think, an air show of sorts. Street vibrations also appears to have been a weird situation as well, and I think we were impacted by that as well. And then just a friendly reminder, the Gold Dust West did take rooms offline for their PIP, as well as the Federal, and I just learned from Stu today that the Marriott is also, Courtyard by Marriott is going through a PIP as well, so they've just taken rooms offline as of this week, right, Stu? Yeah. So guess we're going to get it all done in the next in 9 months or so. I have not changed the forecast, or Chris and I have not changed the forecast at this point. Just want to see if we bounce back in October or not at this point. So this is where we're at, far right, pacing about 2.91% ahead of our budget that we set back in May, and basically flat, negative 0.14% against prior year in terms of our forecast for the entire fiscal year. So I'm happy to answer any questions on this particular report if there are any. Okay, let's move on to 11C, the Hotel, Motel, and RV Park Transient Lodging Report. So I want to thank Chris for putting together a little bit of a different design. As I owed you all an apology a couple months ago when I didn't have something like this in front of me, trying to remember all of the numbers and year-over-year comparisons. And so what this report is showing you guys on the front side is Hotel Motel, July, August, September of this current year, or I'll say fiscal, against July, August, September of 23. So it gives you, if you move from left to right, the total to date, in this case, first quarter, and then you can see our variances down below on that third sort of, I guess I'll call it a box on the bottom. So I think a couple things that I just wanted to point out, it's ADR for us. That's basically the only reason, we're where we're at, because we've been down on the overall RevPAR and our occupancy as well. So with the exception of that little tiny bump for July, but I won't dwell on any of the numbers unless you guys want me to kind of dig into anything. But I like this layout. I appreciate Chris taking the time to put this together for the board. And of course, this will go on the website as well, but I think this is a great tool. Oh, it is. That's right. It is. So it is there. Chris is too efficient. And then the second part of it, and again, we're only showing you the total on the RV park side of things because we only have the 3 RV parks in Carson City. So we're trying to be sensitive to just showing the data in aggregate for the RV parks. So RV parks are an interesting for us in Carson City because predominantly, as you can see, it's mostly non-taxable revenue because you have these folks basically living there on a monthly basis. But it's still a part of our base. And so I won't dwell on any of the specific numbers in here. These obviously vary quite a bit. So this is our new structure for the quarterly reports. I'm grateful to our properties for getting the information to us because normally we plan to do this the third month of the quarter following, but we were able to get it done here in November. So that's huge thanks to our properties and to Chris for pulling this reporting together. So if there are any questions, happy to answer them. And if not, we're going to move on to 11D, Arts and Culture Update. Mr. Brooks, take it away.
Thank you, Eric Brooks, Arts and Culture Program Manager for the record. So we have the Carson City Arts and Culture Strategic Plan Annual Update. So I'm just going to highlight a few of these things, and then if there's any particular section or question that you have, we can go over those. Overall, it was a fantastic year. So the first 1-1, Facilities and Cultural Assets Inventory, we did go through everything and update that, and it's on the website. Thank you, Lydia. 1-3, Multicultural and Heritage Facilities. The first Murals and Music Festival in association with Brewery Arts Center and Visit Carson City was the main sponsor for that event. Also the Chinese Lunar New Year with the Nevada State Museum and Northern Nevada's Children's Museum. And then the Cinco de Mayo, again with Brewery Arts Center, Carson City Parks Recreation Open Space, and the Carson High Latin Club. So these special events in collaboration with the multiple entities enriched our community and celebrated diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we were able to utilize existing public facilities and spaces to add value to our cultural heritage. Then we'll move on to 2-1, festivals and events. This is something that as a community, I think we've been working on and growing for quite some time. Again, with Brewery Arts Center, Nevada State Museum, the Children's Museum, Parks Rec and Open Space, all amazing partners. And then we also had some community and regional stakeholders. So we were able to expand the Mark Twain Days, which we've talked about on several occasions, brought together more than 30 organizations and businesses to collaborate on this new venture. including Virginia City, and that will stretch, looks like, into Carson Valley next year. And we were able to maximize local economic impacts. And Stacy, we are getting that final economic report. We can move on to, thank you, Lydia, for scrolling for me, to 2.6 Cultural Heritage. Again, Brewery Arts Center, Nevada State Museum, Children's Museum, Carson City High Latin Club, Family Food Truck Friday, and Nevada Day Powwow. So we were able to have the Cinco de Mayo 3-day celebration that was attended by over 800 people, along with the taco competition in Fuji Park. And then we were able to endorse the Nevada Day Powwow at MAC. And this public event showcases Native American and First Nations dancing and singing, along with craft and food. Also a hand game tournament, horseshoe tournament, and 3-on-3 tournament. So some great reach we're getting into other communities, heritage communities and cultural communities within Carson City. We can jump down to 3.3 collaboration and partnerships. And this will continue to grow as we move forward. But Travel Nevada, Douglas County, Gardnerville, Genoa, Minden, Virginia City, Gold Hill, Silver City, Brewery Arts Center, the 2 museums, Nevada Artists Association, and the Railroad Museum. A lot of this is going to be compounded as we continue with the cultural corridor moving forward. The new executive director coming on is going to be fantastic, getting that nonprofit established, and then really getting into the weeds with all of these partners and able to expand what we're able to offer on a regional basis. 5.1, Heritage Archives and Preservation Centers. So we were able to work with the Washoe, Paiute, Shoshone tribes, also BAC and NSM, Stewart Indian School, and the Carson High Latin Club. So Brewery Arts Center being able to have the gallery there and performance space, we're able to use, partner with them on so many different occasions. And the museum with their amazing space, Josh Bond, their executive director, has been an incredible partner as well. Let's move on to 6.4, please. The Central Cultural District. So this point is to work with city departments to explore the creation of a cultural district within the downtown corridor, while also addressing the arts and culture needs of all city areas. So we haven't been able, I want to talk about this one because it's one that we haven't been able to have much movement on so far. Events like the mural festivals, that is helping to create a district of sorts. But I think this next year, and what we're working on with this, in particular Anna Freeman with the City Arts and Culture, I really want to make this a priority so that we do have a district that has boundaries and has expectations and will be an area that people have to come visit when they're here. It will become a destination along with everything else that we have going on. So that cultural district is something that is going to be fun to work on. And the 3D cultural corridor should have some financial abilities to help make this a reality, along with how it's going to help the rest of the region. So
Eric, could we, I haven't looked really at an overlay of the historical district, but we do have a West Side Historical District, and perhaps ensuring that that's included in the cultural district would be important. I don't think the West Side Historic District goes to the east side of Carson Street, where the cultural corridor might, but I think it would be good to just keep that in the back of your head, maybe, because our historic committee worked very hard to get that designation, and it shows up in a lot of travel information for people about a historic district, and so if we could just, if it fits, it would be good to have the cultural corridor include that West Side Historic District.
Thank you for that, and I'm sure that it will. Most arts and culture districts tend to be much larger than you would imagine. The one in Reno runs all the way out almost to Sparks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really big footprint, even though what's really you're going to be seeing is condensed. So I think the western side of town and that district will be included, but then having the eastern side looped in,
Sure.
and then of course down to the roundabout. So
Okay.
it's going to be a really fun project to get all these different pieces moving. And those were the ones I was going to highlight. I'm happy to take any questions about that, any of these. And just as a reminder, Karen Yank, speaking of the roundabout, she will be in town December 5th at the Brewery Arts Center. Her small works are currently on exhibition there in the upstairs space. We activated that so that we could have her works up. She will be having a reception on December 5th from 5 to 7 with an artist talk at 6 p.m. And the ribbon cutting will be December 6th at the sculpture itself in the roundabout at 3 p.m., open to everyone to come out and meet the artist.
All your work and collaborations are fun to watch, I'm telling you. It's impressive. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and I'll just add, this was Eric's first go-around putting this together, so I really appreciate the effort that he put in. And of course, we will share this, Stacy, I think through Anna, because it'll go into the overall strategic plan with the city's piece of the puzzle on that. And Eric and I talked to you about getting a jump start on this next year to hopefully get her out a little.
Yeah, I'd really like to have this presented earlier when it's fresher in everyone's mind. So probably August would be the best time to do it, have that month. And really, I'm starting to work on this throughout the year. So it's not something you try to look back and what have we done all year, but we have marks throughout the year. So it should be easy to present that right away.
Thank you, sir. All right, if there are no questions or comments for Eric, great job. I will move on to Mr. Wexler, 11E, Events and Sales Update. Take it away, Stu.
For the record, Stu Wexler, Event and Sales Manager. Just going to go through some of the shows and tournaments and events we've had the last few days, few weeks. I'm just going to report on the Teams show that I went to back in September. This was a new venture for us in that we're looking at totally just sports tourism. We went through it before bringing to Carson City. These organizations that I put on are just some of the ones that have shown real interest in bringing some of the events to Carson City that we haven't had too much before. A lot of softball, a lot of soccer, obviously, a lot of baseball. But there's a lot of interest in some of the ones we haven't had, like the American Kickball League, which is become pretty popular around the country. And I'm working with Parks and Rec on that, on dates, trying to secure dates for 25, mostly going into 2026, possibly, on that. And then obviously Game Day USA, youth and baseball and softball. And we have to remember a lot of these will look on a larger scale where they might like stadium events. We send them up. That's where we partner with Lake Tahoe. We look at the youth and amateur sports for our area. We even we'll partner with the Reno area too, because obviously the fields they have up there. I am working with American Junior Golf Association to bring the 12 to 15-year-olds here, working with possibly a couple courses in Carson. And just to let you know, there are some of the alumni that have participated in this. You might know some of the names: Tiger Woods, Jordan Spieth, Ricky Fowler. They all started in this association. So it's an association that promotes the youth going into collegiate and then obviously the pro status, as they get older. And one I'm working with Parks and Rec is very interested in coming here, the World Axe Throwing League, which would obviously take place at the MAC on the amateur level, but this is huge across the country, fills up stadiums. For us, the MAC would be the appropriate facility, and they possibly talk about bringing ESPN to this to televise it, depending how it goes the first year or two. So that's one, and believe it or not, BMX, we do have a track here. It would be on the youth, obviously amateur. At the Teams show we were at, that was very popular here. BMX for youth racing is very popular. So we do have a track across from Livermore Field that doesn't get really enough use, so that's what we're going to try and do and bring that into Carson. And then the Indigenous Sports and Wellness, based out of Ontario, Canada, is a organization that promotes all sports, multi-sports levels for Indigenous people, Native Americans. And they are, when we talked to them, they were familiar with Carson, our history in the Native American area. So they would like to work with us in that, in this area. And so that's what Parks and Rec, Scott Chapman and I are working on. And obviously USA Softball, amateurs, youth, adults, it's like a 7 to 14 age. So those are some of the organizations. We're also looking at some other organizations that have shown interest in coming to Carson, more so in 2026, because as we just started with this show, they've already scheduled out a lot of their 2025 dates. So we'll look at going farther in 2026 and working with Parks and Rec. They're been a great partner with us, obviously. Any questions on any of those? And then I've mentioned before, we actually have the dates for No Limits. It's an organization based out of Texas that we've been working with for the last few months to secure dates to bring national tournaments here to Carson. So working with Scott Chapman, we did have the following dates that we're going to look at: May 9th to 11th, June 13th to the 15th, August 1st to the 3rd, and then September 5th to the 7th. So they are coming out here early March. They'll do a site tour. The owners of this organization will show them Carson City, obviously, and all the fields to give them a better idea of what Carson has to offer. So they're very excited, and Parks and Rec is actually excited to have those as well. And the next one's just the little results from the Ford Bronco celebration we had. I did want to go over some of that. So they had about 140 registered participants, with about 65 that came from outside Nevada. And then they ended up closer to 150 because they did have the last couple days, they did have participants that showed up and didn't register. So very excited. We did have one from Canada. We had cars from the East Coast coming out here. And the top picture, this is an organization that goes to our areas and cleans up the canyons. So these two vehicles, one was in Ash Canyon, one was in Brunswick Canyon. And the one in Ash Canyon, I believe it's the Jeep, that was not there last year. So that's within a year that they found, that this vehicle was here. So they actually, before all the events started, they actually went in, they checked the canyons out, and they will go out and pull out these vehicles that have been sitting there for quite a while. The other vehicle, you could tell it was looked like it was burnt, and so that had been sitting in Brunswick, they said, they think for quite a while. So that's really a benefit of what they do, and they do that to all the areas they go to. So that really helped. And then just some of the areas that they went with in Prison Hill. So a lot of the out-of-state participants will attend the events through the country. They follow Ford Bronco throughout. In Tennessee, they have 1,500 vehicles that will attend. Obviously, we're not going to get that big. The goal for Carson is to get us to about 300 vehicles at Mills Park is what we can cap out now. And then we can probably look at maybe other facilities. But it's a very, got a great response from everyone that came here. They had 8 vendors from California, from California, Utah, Tennessee, and a couple from Nevada here, Capital Ford being one of them. So something they look forward to. And we already have the dates for next year set for October 8th to the 11th of 2025. And then the last one, touched on it for a minute here. I've worked with Martin the last couple of years on that, and I think Eric will work with him going forward. But the powwow, this year's powwow had over 300 registered dancers compared to 150 last year. So we did see an increase. Martin does do a good job, obviously, of marketing this throughout the country. There were 10 singing and drumming groups as compared to 4 last year. And according to them, approximately 2,000 spectators per day over the 3-day period of Nevada Day, with the majority coming from the Washington, Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and Montana areas. So obviously that is an event that has been successful, and Martin does a really great job on that. So that's it. Thank you. Any questions I can help?
Any questions, comments for Stu? I'll just add, this board, you guys charged me with figuring out a way to get in the trade show world from a sports tourism perspective, and I think this Teams 24 is going to pay dividends by Stu being there. It already resulted in some unforeseen, honestly, collaboration with Visit Lake Tahoe on the South Shore, just in terms of they have the stadiums, we have the green space, and sharing of leads is sort of back and forth. And obviously, we've got some things to figure out with how do we share the lodging, pieces of the puzzle and all that good stuff. But I think it's opened up a door to some new sports, and again, trying to diversify our product here from a sports perspective. So I appreciate Stu's work on this, but I thank the board for the guidance and the direction on this end of things. So we'll see if there isn't another show out there, not to, kill Stu being on the road, but there may be other opportunities as well that will open up.
Well,
so.
the next show is in London, England, so.
Oh, I think I have to go to that one though, Stu. Yeah, I forgot about that. Forgot to tell you that. Yeah.
Well, I think a board member probably needs to go to that as well.
Oh, Andrew, are you coming with me?
I've been there.
Oh, there we go. Okay, Stacy, it's all you. All right, well, with that, thank you, Stu. If there are no further questions, we will move on to 11F, Marketing and PR Update. Lydia Beck, take it away, please.
Thank you. For the record, Lydia Beck. Don't worry, I only have 45 slides of data for you. No, only kidding. I do have data for you, but only about 5 or 6. So we're going to go through the digital and website update, our PR update, and then I wanted to walk you through our visitor profile for Q4, so April through June of this year. So you'll see some nice imagery throughout here from Shelby Holte, who's our blogger and content creator. And then that cover shot was actually one that Zach just took with our drone a couple weeks ago. And this is from the Capped Tahoe Trail. We thank Greg Bergeron and some of the Muscle Power team that came up and helped us get up there to do a shoot to finally get some good assets. So as far as October, we had a strong month on the website. Our great numbers are really contributed to actually removing Ripe from the website. So we have gone back to the way it was before, where we have a lodging referral page. So if anyone clicks off of our listed hotels on our hotels page, that counts as a lodging referral. So we're seeing our numbers improve pretty significantly since removing Ripe. And overall, our lodging referrals doubled after that happened. So we're really pleased with what we're seeing and feel like this is a confident way to move forward. And overall, our social stats are also up significantly due to higher spending promoting the many events that happened throughout October. Our cost per click, though, was higher on our search, most likely due to the election, which happens pretty often. So our paid search took a small hit, but we still generated over 100 lodging referrals on our paid search as well. As far as public relations, we also had a really great month. We did a paid editorial in Food and Travel magazine that turned out really well. And so we were actually featured in the table of contents. And then we had our own featured story with some really beautiful imagery that they selected. And so we focused on outdoor adventures that happened in the winter, some food, and then, of course, arts and culture. And that was paired with a full page ad that included our new nostalgia refresh. And that was presented to an audience of over 600,000. So they have a really great audience and following digitally and in print. In addition to that, we facilitated a visit for Ginny Pryor, who is a freelancer for the Bay Area Travel Writers. She is a wonderful human being that did the V&T Railway experience, the Carson Hot Springs, also went to the Railroad Museum as well. And we expect to see that probably in the East Bay Times. We mentioned last month about the Informed Traveler podcast that I was featured on from Travel Nevada that brought in Randy Sharman to do the Lake Tahoe Loop. And then we had some really great coverage locally for the Ghost Walk and for Nevada Day, of course. So what did our Q4 visitor look like? From April to June, overall, we saw about 530,000 trips. They stayed about an average of 1.8 days. But for those who did stay overnight, we saw that 41.2% stayed 6 days or longer. Our breakdown of in-state versus out-of-state is really interesting as well, with over 90% coming from outside of Nevada. And we had a strong split of one-time versus repeat customers, showing that we're continuing to reach new visitors. And hopefully our marketing is what's driving them to market. Of course, we can't say that for sure, but we hope it's ensured is an influence. And then 16% of the people in Carson City from April to June were visitors versus our locals. This graph is showing our total visits by week, highlighting that June is a strong month for us, of course, which we can expect coming into the summer months. And where are people going while they're here? They're definitely shopping, but they're also visiting downtown and going to our attractions and our hotels. Our visitor demographic is primarily white, has an income, as Kyle alluded, we definitely skew a little bit lower below the 75, but we still have some strong influence from 75 to 150. And then we are pretty good split between 1 to 2 people per household and 3 to 5. So it's also nice to see our age range is capturing a younger demographic as well. When I first started, we skewed quite higher into the older demographic. And where are these people coming from? Primarily the Sacramento DMA, LA, and the Bay Area DMA. So it's nice to see that a lot of these are skewing to what Kyle is seeing with their data as well. As we get granular into the actual cities, it's we're seeing, LA, Reno, Salt Lake City, and Phoenix. Our length of stay is still hovering around 2 days, but of course we're seeing the farther that someone comes, the longer that they're staying. And for Q4, our average ADR was $113, and our occupancy and ADR increased significantly into June, as we'd expect it to. Our RevPAR for our revenue per available room and demand all build as you move into the summer. And just want to remind you, all of these numbers that you're seeing in these last 2 slides are only from April until June, but we do have data for all of last year as well. And that is it for me. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Otherwise, it's nice to see that we're still skewing along with what we were seeing last year with Kyle.
Any questions for Lydia? Great job. I really think you and Zach are doing an amazing job, and the imagery is great, and I love the PR that we're getting. I mean, this is really helping to put us on the map. I love the culinary piece. You see a lot around the arts and culture sector, and I think that's just fantastic, quite frankly. So, okay, well, great
Thanks.
job. Thank you. If there are no further questions for Lydia, we'll go ahead and move on to 11G, future agenda items. Does anybody from the board have anything that they would like to be brought forward at a future meeting? Okay, hearing none. We'll go ahead and move on to 11H, upcoming meetings, right here in this room, Monday, December 9th at 4 p.m. So back to the normal Monday schedule. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, do we have any board announcements or requests for information?
Yeah, I just want to mention a couple of things that are pertinent to the Visit Carson City and CTA. Board of Supervisors passed a series of agenda items at our last meeting to finally get the pickleballs rolling at Mills Park. So it was significantly more expensive than we originally thought, but we were able to cobble together some funds from savings and from ARPA funds. It's a little over $1 million, but So all of that, including the contract, was let. The work should start imminently here, depending upon weather, I suppose. And we will end up with tournament level courts. So, I spoke to the group, it's a couple of great citizens whose name escaped me right now, who have been really, Whitefields, who've been spearheading this. Thank you, Denny. And, their goal is to bring tournaments here. So, reach out to them, get in touch with them. I told them that CTA could probably help with some of that. And it's really what we're here to do. And we're really trying to get back into that sports market. And the way pickleball is, I think it fits right in our demographics. I think those folks will come and stay. I think they'll take advantage of our restaurants, our history. And I think it's a really good tie. They tend to have, money to spend,
Definitely. And I think having courts aside from the MAC Center is going to be a great benefit too, because we did talk to a few organizations for pickleball when we were down there. So I think that'll be fantastic.
Well, yeah, and the fact that we have the availability to do, both inside and outside venues where they could, and these are going to be fenced so that they can be tournament level courts. So, along with that, I'm sure you heard that we got certainly one of the largest grants the city's ever received for Mills Park, to implement the Mills Park master plan. So all of those things, I think, will, between the pickleball courts, that will really take an already amazing showpiece, in my opinion, and really fluff it up. Mills Park will be a real attraction, not that it isn't already. And then I'm sure David's aware of this. We got some feedback from governor's staff and someone from legislative leadership that the BDR that the city pushed forward regarding funding for the VNT commission, basically to have the state sort of take it over and run it with an executive director. They kind of said, yeah, it's probably not going to happen. So we sort of rebounded and pushed it to one of the interim committees to do a study in between the session, so that if, whatever their recommendations be, everything from, staffing it to how we would dismantle it if we decided to go that route. So I think that's probably a better, if we weren't going to get the funding anyway, to have somebody run it, and I think it was a long shot, then this interim study will hopefully allow all of the issues to be brought forward and really analyze what the issues are and why, we struggle and how it could be professionalized. But there are some serious questions that have to be asked in terms of how long we continue throwing money at something that isn't profitable. So I have my feelings on that. There's been a lot of taxpayer money thrown at that over the course of the last 20 plus years, and just to, sort of go done seems such a tragedy. But it's also tragic to continue to throw money away at something that could go elsewhere too. So anyway, I don't know where that's going to go, but that's the change in the BDR, and I think that BDR will fly. I don't think there's any problem with that. So that's it for me.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I forgot in my presentation, we didn't have the data, the information at the time when I put the presentation together, but I wanted you all to save the date for December 10th from 6 to 8 at the Brewery Arts Center for the premiere of our mini movie campaign. So our new holiday, our winter campaign is kind of a spoof off of a Hallmark movie. We just got done filming it all last week. And I think it's going to be really, really wonderful. And so we're going to cut that mini movie down to make our campaign, but we're going to have a full movie premiere at the Brewery Arts Center at the Performance Hall. And so we'll have more emails to come, but wanted you to just save the date for that. I think it's going to be a really fun evening. We'll have the actors there. We'll do a Q&A. We've even got a blooper reel 3-6 production and KPS3 did a really, really wonderful job, and we're really excited to see it. So it'll be about 15 minutes long, and then we'll cut that down from there. But I just wanted to put that on your plate. Thank you.
Sarah, I also forgot, December 6th is the tree lighting, the snowflake and
Yep.
whatever we call that, sorry. Silver. What is
Silver
it?
and Snowflake Festival lights.
Silver and, yeah, whatever what she said. That's the 6th.
All right, we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody? Come on up.
Denny French, Carson City, thank you. I won't apologize for being late. I had to wait for the agenda to be printed up, and then I was called, and I was surprised to see call from the mayor. It actually was from Alexi. But I went outside, and the message was that there's been an error on the packet for the upcoming meeting. It's going to be corrected, and a new copy for people like myself will be available on Monday. But I wanted to thank you all, and I'm sorry I missed some of the presentations and the trying to get one place and being at another. Very disappointing, and I wish you would just hold meetings until I get there. Scott, I'm just not going to let you I'm sorry, Todd, don't want you to get places in time so that I could be late too. But I'm sorry about the V&T situation. I believe, even though it was not necessarily the biggest fundraiser, that things could perhaps be gathered up into that area, utilizing the small air show deal that you could put on, or a small air race. So you get people up into the vicinity of the disc dart golf, and then you could have something at the range as well. So that part of the area could be more utilized and people become more familiar with it, and perhaps short trips of the train and all could be incorporated. So that's just an idea on that. And then I was a little confused when I was trying to find your site. They didn't have click downs. They usually have a blue click to, and that wasn't available. But Mr. Razor at the City Hall looked to make sure it wasn't just me, so he noticed that right off. But that could have been just a fluke, but the main thing is access to information, like the dates, very clear. Some of the calendar things that have been put out by the city are so scattered as to where to find them. I would like to see it consolidated into one. Several cities that I looked into had a consolidated deal. Every day had every event on it. You could click on it and get further information, but you would go down the line, time, date, or date and time, and the title, and then you click on that. And I thought that was a great way to do it. We do it sort of as a calendar type study, and then you only have the main meetings that are here per se. You won't get the school district, or you won't get this or that. And so it's when you have a conflict and it's also not easily accessed, then you don't have people show up. So I appreciate some consideration on those, and I'm going to make you late next time so I wouldn't miss anything, and I look forward to seeing all the presentations in full, and thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn. Thanks everyone for being here. So can I get a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Second it?
We don't
And
really need one.
we don't, do we? It said to do it. All right, we're adjourned.